Welcome to another episode. Today, I'm joined by Nikhil and Katya from the Wormhole team. And the whole point of doing this episode is to raise more awareness about one, Interop token standards, and the fact that institutions are here and they're using protocols like Wormhole to tokenize assets. So, welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So, let's just get started, right? One, I want Nikhil about Interop's token standard in general. What are they and what are you?
Yeah. So Interop token standards I actually frame it a bit differently. There are token standards and then there are token frameworks. Token standards are like ERC20, ERC like NFT standards, other ERC standards that are actually built into the token itself. I think that Interop protocols are primarily building token transfer frameworks, which work with any kind of token, whether it's an ERC20 token, whether it's an NFT, whether it's any other kind of ERC token. These token transfer frameworks allow you to transfer tokens cross-chain to make those tokens multi-chain. And those token transfer frameworks come with a bunch of different features out of the box. So they come with features that give the token issuers, whether it's an institution or a DeFi protocol or whoever it is, flexibility so that their token and their setup and their entire deployment is future-proofed. It gives them parameters that they can tune so that they can tune their own security settings. They can set their own admins, their own pauser roles, those types of things. And then it comes with a whole sort of backing product suite behind it. So like with Wormhole, we're building Wormhole native token transfers, Wormhole NTT, which a lot of people have probably heard about. And Wormhole NTT is not just the smart contract framework that allows for transferring tokens cross-chain. It comes with out-of-the-box support for Wormhole Connect. So people have a UI that automatically is able to use any token that integrates with NTT. It comes with support for Wormhole Scan, which is an explorer, so you can see the volume. It comes with support for relaying, and a whole bunch of other features out of the box. So that's how it divided up, and that's what I think Interop protocols are really building.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so initially when all the Interop protocols kind of started, I saw it pretty much as something that you can, use to bridge assets across chain. But then over time, I'm coming to realize that there's a much bigger play here, right? You can practically tokenize any asset, and as institutions are coming on chain, you can take their assets on chain through these token frameworks, right? So I'm curious, how do you cope of this product particularly at Wormhole, and how do institutions actually understand this product? Do they understand it at all?
Yeah, I guess I can start, and maybe it would be great if Katya wants to add anything. I think I totally agree with you. These products are not just for existing tokens and extending those tokens to be multi-chain, which is the case for a lot of like DeFi native protocols today. It's if you're an asset issuer, it makes a lot of sense to directly partner with an interoperability protocol because you want to be everywhere, or you want to be in multiple places that make the most sense, tap into the communities that have the most liquidity, that have the most activity from day one. And so I think we see it, or at least I see it in very similar terms to you, where it makes a lot of sense for asset issuers to partner directly with interoperability protocols. And then when it comes to understanding these token transfer frameworks, I think generally there is pretty good knowledge about these token transfer frameworks now. I think it's just walking them through. There are other things that matter, that they're sort of things that matter to institutions that we need to sort of talk them through, whether it comes to brands, security, and the entire ecosystem that's built around these products. But yeah, we'll let Katya go and answer as well.
Yeah, I think historically, even in the DeFi ecosystem, interoperability was sort of an afterthought. You launch the token, and then you were like, okay, maybe there's this new blockchain that I want to go to, and maybe I'll figure out how to do it. I'll just use a native bridge, and it's kind of a crappy experience if you wanted to withdraw. And so that's something that we've been helping teams focus on improving over the last few years. And now it's getting to the point where Interop isn't an afterthought. It's something that's built into the core functionality of assets. And so institutions especially are thinking about this from day one, especially if they're on the really massive financial side. Teams are starting to think about having their own private blockchains for settlements, but they want to maintain fungibility with the broader crypto ecosystem. So right now, I know there's a lot of research and experimentation happening in the space between projects like Project Guardian and a handful of others, where institutions like understand the need to be able to maintain fungibility with these assets and go wherever their users are.
I mean, so before this recording, we were kind of talking about branding in crypto, right? A lot of protocols are just DeFi, and some are institutional. So even in my question, I kind of framed it like I understood it from a DeFi perspective. But then, how do you, as a company, kind of grow your brand to like attract institutions? Like that's one of my main questions, right? Like how do you get brands to talk to you guys, and like what does the BD even look like? Like, is it going to take an effort from us to reach out to them? Because I feel like if we wait and watch for institutions to like come to crypto, build products on chain, they're going to think about, okay, I have a tokenized fund, let me tokenize it on Ethereum. But then later on, they're going to realize that there are so many other chains. So it's almost like we have to go to them and kind of educate, right? So I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Education is like the number one thing that all of these teams are working on right now. You know, a lot of these funds are like excited. They hear about crypto. They aren't quite sure what that means. They hear like somebody reaches out to them about potentially tokenizing their fund and they're, you know, reading into it. But I think like on the fundamental level, a lot of these institutions still don't fully understand like what a blockchain is. And so I think what we try to do when we engage with institutions is to, you know, make sure that the value is clear from the fundamental layer, and then make sure that they can better understand like the role that interoperability plays. You know, making sure that that's, again, part of their initial design and how they think about the space in this natively multi-chain view. The branding piece is fun. I think there's always like this push-pull in the crypto space between wanting to, you know, engage with your community, be able to like publish DeFi native content and like crypto native content that people like really resonate with, that's like catchy on crypto Twitter, but it can't come at a cost to your like professional presence with institutions. So it's about finding that balance and like using different like mediums for different types of content. So obviously LinkedIn's going to be a little bit more buttoned up. What we do on crypto Twitter might be a little bit more informal and casual. But I think at the end of the day, like the core values that we want to communicate to both retail and like users and institutions is always going to be security as number one. And that's not something that we'll ever joke about. And that like theme continues to get communicated just in slightly different ways.
So how do you guys describe like the current understanding of institutions? So like, is it Ethereum, Solana, or do they are they aware of the hundreds of chains that are there and the fact that you have to maybe just like build for the entire ecosystem through Interop protocols?
Nikhil, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think so. Most know of Ethereum. Most know of Solana, especially with Solana's been growing a lot recently. Most will know about, have some kind of understanding of the L2 ecosystem, but I think a lot of it comes back to what Katya was saying. A lot of it is like they want to learn where it makes sense to go. And as an Interop protocol, that's like a unique value add that we can provide because we are live on a lot of different chains. We have not only built integrations for a lot of different chains, we've not only shipped products on a lot of different chains, we've tapped into those communities as well. We kind of have our growth team, our BD team, our technical team. So our growth and BD team has a really good sense of like the communities and the ecosystem and the projects on all these different chains. Not only because we've integrated, but because we've evaluated for connecting via Wormhole. And the technical team has a really good understanding of everything that goes into actually building a product for this chain. So let's say you want to go to some new nascent VM chain that's not EVM or not Solana VM. Our technical team can provide like a lot of guidance on what does it actually mean to build in this new VM. Is it going to be really complicated? Is it going to kind of eat up a ton of development timeline, or is it kind of similar to other things that are there? So I think that is definitely one of the unique value adds that partnering with Interop protocols has for institutions, which is that we have that experience across so many different chains and we can provide that guidance, because I think ultimately they're looking for that guidance on like outside of the big chains. We know there's this massive ecosystem to tap into. What makes the most sense to go to and where makes the most sense to prioritize?
Makes sense. So it's kind of like they know about Ethereum, they know about Solana, but then they're aware that there's a bigger ecosystem out there, but they don't know what's the right step. So it's kind of like, I wouldn't say hand holding, but just giving pointers, because like we do this 24/7 and this is all we know about. So this is where you can like tap into the next big market.
Yeah, exactly.
Katya, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think like the institutions aren't going to be scrolling through crypto Twitter. I think like that's like the fundamental way that I find out about new chains for the most part. I do think that like there are certain clusters of the ecosystem that they're super aware of. Like I think Bitcoin has really resonated with a lot of these teams globally. Like a lot of central banks are like really excited about building Bitcoin reserves and exploring what like digital currency could look like for them. And then I'll also say that I think like some of these ecosystem teams have done a really great job of building their communities. Like OP Superchain is something that's like really compelling and something that is easier for institutions to understand other than needing to understand all of the different chains that are within that ecosystem. So like obviously I'm wearing the OP red right now, but like OP, Arbitrum Orbit, like ZK Sync, they've all done really great jobs in building relationships with these institutions and helping them kind of start to cross that knowledge gap and introducing them into their ecosystems instead of having to like have all of these independent chains do outreach themselves.
I mean, so you guys are based in the US. Like after the elections, have you seen any increase in appetite for crypto, or like is it just something that I'm getting on Twitter at this point?
I mean, it was pretty exciting to see that one of the board members of the Securitized team is now being elected is put up for the position of crypto czar. So we'll see what that looks like. I think excitement is definitely there. I think everybody's kind of waiting with bated breath to see how the next year follows through. I think nothing's changed just yet, but Gary Gensler stepping down was kind of a shock, at least to me.
Not to me. I feel like that was gonna happen. But anyways, I think I agree with Katya. I think there's a lot more excitement. I think we'll probably see a lot more inbound coming from institutions, given the kind of new administration that's in place. That's a lot more crypto friendly. And at least the expectation that like the SEC is going to have a lot more crypto friendly regulations. And a lot of crypto people talking about moving to New York, which is a signal.
Bullish. I mean, it's also going to be interesting to see how this like regulation actually evolves. I do think everybody, like Micah was the first to really set like strong legislation around crypto assets. I think it'll take time for us to still continue to have strong regulation in the US. But there's a lot of great like teams that are working on this. Like Rebecca Reddick has been doing a lot of time, working on Capitol Hill, helping teams understand. So I think it's just like there's a lot of excitement now. I think the follow through is going to be really critical. But we have a lot of great crypto native folks who are going to help inform that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you guys also worked with Sky recently, and like they had the whole rebrand from Maker. They expanded to Solana, which was great. So they're using the Wormhole entity framework for the USDS token, right? So I'm kind of curious, like, what was that process like? Because they're a very Ethereum native team. So I'm sure like when they were expanding to Solana, they would have talked to you guys. And then how did they come to decide that, okay, Wormhole entity is the framework for like our expansion?
Yeah, I can chime in on this one. It's been great fun working with the Sky team. There's a number of different like contributors that we've been working on to help with this expansion to Solana. I think Rune has said historically that he's spent a lot of time looking into the SVM, and that's been like a key driver into wanting to build into the Solana ecosystem. Solana has done a really great job of being a home for new builders, lots of new experiments, and it's been a great home for stable assets as well. And I think as the biggest like decentralized asset maker or Sky rather, I always get miss out on the rebrand. But Sky has wanted to participate in that ecosystem. So, before launch, we were helping them understand the ecosystem as it stands today, helped facilitate introductions to the different DeFi protocols. And I think like because of the nature of NTT itself, like the framework is permissionless open source, were able to kind of run with the framework and the deployment themselves and came to us for support, but largely it's been pretty autonomous.
I mean, so Nikhil, from a product perspective, like what persuaded them to like choose you guys?
Yeah, I think so. One thing I'll just add to what Katya said on kind of the technical side and their ability to run out of the box with it was I think we've built a lot of tooling around NTT to make that process of expanding to new chains easier, especially for these Ethereum teams that are looking to expand to Solana or these Solana teams that are looking to expand out to Ethereum. So you can deploy the contracts out of the box as is. We've built the CLI tool that allows you to just run a bunch of command line instructions, and then you can the programs on Solana and the EVM contracts are deployed for you. And so it's like very low lift for some of these teams to actually start to access these ecosystems. There's a little bit of education that might be needed on who are the DeFi protocols to partner with, like what Katya said. What's kind of the explorer situation? How do we make sure our asset metadata is properly populated everywhere? How do we make sure it looks good? How do we like set up a squads wallet on Solana, or how do we set up a safe wallet on Ethereum? Kind of all of that like basic on-ramping stuff for these projects, whether they're expanding one way or the other. But beyond that, it's like very easy for them to expand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one large value add for a lot of teams that are looking at NTT versus other frameworks, is this very low lift to expand and very low learning curve. Beyond that, I think NTT is feature packed. Obviously, it has the backing of the entire Wormhole product suite behind it, but it also has, as we mentioned before, all those parameters that you can tune, the security features that allow you to have a future-proof deployment. So flexible verification, so that you can flexibly kind of, if you want to change your verification settings in the future, you're able to do that. It has security settings like pausing, setting rate limits, setting access controls, so setting an owner and a pauser. And these are all things that these teams use, or at least want to be able to use in the future, in case their sort of outlook on an ecosystem that they're connected to, or in case their risk tolerance changes. I think you see in the initial stages, they want to have a big launch, and so maybe risk tolerance is a bit lower when they're launching, but maybe in the future, as they look at volumes and how things settle down, they might want to tune those settings.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so the token standards, or like token frameworks, they've seen so much adoption at this point, right? Like between all of the big token frameworks, there's like almost 100 billion secured at this point. I'm not sure, but something like that, roughly. But it just feels like, in terms of acceptance, there's more like concerns about token frameworks than something like, let's say, intents. Even though the adoption may be opposite, or like token frameworks, in my mind at least, they've been around much longer. So like, why do you think that's the case? Like, why is there some criticism for token frameworks, but then intents are much widely accepted throughout the ecosystem?
I wouldn't say that there are, I'd be curious to get Kasha's thoughts on this too, but I wouldn't say that there is criticism for token frameworks. There is maybe controversy for token frameworks, because typically the most ideal, or the outcome that makes the most sense, is that you use one token transfer framework for your token. It doesn't really make a ton of sense for every project to like build a wrapper on top of multiple token transfer frameworks, and then they have multiple parallel security settings to manage, multiple parallel like just frameworks and deployments to manage. Doesn't really make a ton of sense. It makes sense to go with one token transfer framework, especially with how feature packed these token transfer frameworks are, with the fact that they have flexible verification, with the fact that they're upgradable if you can want them. You own the entire deployment. So you have that flexibility to change in the future. With how many features are in there, it makes sense to really go with one token transfer framework for your token. And then once you go with that token transfer framework, unless something massively changes in the future, it typically makes sense to stick with it if it's working. When I look at intents, it seems like you don't choose a single intense like framework or a single intense protocol to use. They sort of all compete in UIs like Jumper, and they compete on price, speed, etc. So I think that's maybe where the controversy comes from. I wouldn't say there's criticism, but there's maybe more controversy among teams when it comes to token transfer frameworks.
I'll also say that I think they're very complementary. I think like they're on different levels of like the asset stack. I would say like like the frameworks themselves help in actually mobilizing these assets cross chain. Intents are just a faster, most times riskier way to get your asset there. The intense space is really like competing for speed and for cost. And these frameworks themselves are about like functionality and feature set, and being able to future-proof the assets themselves. So I think like even when you look at different intense models, the underlying token framework is going to help or hurt the way that these assets sometimes participate in these ecosystems. So if you just have, if you're not working with any of these token standards and you're really relying on the canonical bridge to kind of move this asset to and from a chain, it makes it more complex and more costly for these solvers to rebalance their positions on different chains. So being able to tap into faster transfers, burn and mint functionality through NTT makes it a lot more seamless for users. So I think they go hand in hand. Hopefully people aren't, conflating the two and getting them to compete with one another, because I think that they're very synergistic.
Yeah. I would just add on to what Katya said. I definitely don't think that token standards and intense protocols are competing. Token standards are for sure the foundation to make your token natively multi-chain via a burn and mint mechanism. And then on top of that, you have intense protocols that can help improve the user experience of actually moving those assets cross-chain.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, and you guys are also kind of using a hybrid model, right? Because for rebalancing, there's probably nothing better to use than a token standard asset, because you can just mint and burn. And there's practically, it's so much more capital efficient, right? Because you technically do not need any capital to move around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're not waiting for the 7-day cooldown if you're trying to, manage your positions as a solver. That's a pain. That's costly, right? If you're paying for that 7-day duration, that's cost that the solvers are going to impose onto users of the intense protocol. So ultimately, using these burn and mint models brings down costs and makes these systems a lot more competitive.
Okay. I mean, so coming back to the institution side of things, right? So I feel intense and this particular discussion is very much in the weeds of crypto Twitter and DeFi, right? But institutions, so let's say a Sky has certain considerations to go to Solana. I feel Sky is one of the bigger apps, so their needs would be somewhere similar to institutions. Would you say that's the case, or are institutions even more risk averse and they care even more about security? So there's much more hand-holding to do in that case.
I think they have the same concerns and same considerations. Fortunately, they're just starting from a higher level of basic knowledge. So I think Sky especially really takes security very seriously. There's no room for error with a multi-billion-dollar protocol, and I think they share that sentiment with institutions. They just fortunately understand Solana, they understand interoperability a lot more, and so we can kind of have quicker discussions to get them to the same end goal.
Okay. And would you say so entity and all of these frameworks, they also have customizations, right? You can have different number of validators, you can have different types of verification schemes. Do institutions actually care, or do they just want to go with the defaults, or whatever is the best in-house solution for security?
Institutions do care about having that flexibility. I think it's really important for institutions. It's really important for institutions to be able to rely on something that's as robust as the Wormhole Guardian set that's been around and operating very smoothly for the last 3 or 4 years. And on top of that, it is really important for institutions to have that flexibility to be able to have their own layer of verification often. So their own custom layer of verification padded on top of the Wormhole Guardian set. And using that custom layer of verification, it all depends. Each institution is different. They have sometimes different regulatory or compliance requirements that they need to uphold. And so some institutions want to institute sort of blacklists or allow lists or additional sort of rules embedded into their custom verification to block certain kinds of transfers that you wouldn't be able to otherwise get without having that custom layer on top. And so I think it's really important for these institutions to be able to leverage those types of features and enforce their own kinds of custom rules when performing token transfers.
I mean, makes sense. Would you say that's because of regulatory reasons, or let's say they would also have a lot of privacy needs in a way, right? A lot of proprietary data that they cannot expose to the outside world?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all those things. I think it's regulatory reasons, it's probably privacy reasons, and then I think another one is probably risk tolerance. When you talk about moving billions of dollars of assets on chain, there's a very different kind of risk tolerance to maybe a small DeFi protocol that's just getting started and wants to launch their token multi-chain.
Makes sense. Anything to add from your side?
No, I think he covers that very well.
Awesome. I mean, so in general, like I'm trying to understand, like why is every institution launching their own stablecoin? Like, what's the incentive game there? Because any institution that comes up, it feels like we have so many stablecoins at this point, and it cannot be just to get adoption in crypto, because I feel like they're not going for that, because I don't see that push personally. Like it's only USDC, USDT that have seen wider adoption in the ecosystem. But what's the play on like, I don't know, the institution side for launching stablecoins?
Honestly, this is one of my favorite like subsectors of the industry. I think stablecoins are so interesting because a lot of these institutions have really in-depth knowledge of remittances, of like off-chain payment systems, and they have really strong theses on how they think that the space, how like crypto is going to build these systems on chain. And so all of these teams are launching stablecoins within different regulatory like environments. They're trying to, use different types of assets in the background. They're trying to experiment with different like reserves. It's more of an opportunity for them to compete to see which innovation is going to be most sustainable and which one's going to win the regulatory game. So that's been really fun to see. And I think a lot of some of these providers are launching assets with the intent to like be distributed within the current crypto ecosystem. Some of them are launching stables with the intent to build systems around them. And that's when I think it gets really interesting, right? So if you're launching a stablecoin with the purpose of it being used for remittances within your own platform, that's pretty powerful. That's what I'm really excited to see. So the more the merrier. I think like initially when, I think the thesis on like blockchains was always like, you should fork code so that you can modify it and continue to like get to this final ideal end state. I think that it's the same idea with stablecoins too. Like, what is the right model? Obviously, USDC and USDT have done really, really well to date, but like we're still so far away from like mainstream adoption and really like hitting that critical mass. So I don't think like we can really pick any long-term survivors. So hopefully some of these new players can think of creative strategies.
I mean, so how are you guys seeing it being like integrated into their platforms? Because most of these stablecoin issuers are in the US, and unfortunately, I don't have access to those products. So I'm not in the know-how. But like, how are you guys seeing it being integrated across their platforms?
Nikhil,
Integrated in what way do you mean integrated?
Like, let's say an institution kind of launches their stablecoin, but then they want it to be used in their products, right? Like maybe it's for I don't know. So let's say you guys would have to give me an example, to be honest.
Yeah, well, maybe Katya can speak better to this. Maybe it's more so the case that either those products haven't been integrated yet into a broader product suite that these institutions have launched, and they're only sort of on-chain products right now that gives the institutions more liquidity. They're like investment vehicles that people can sort of put more as sort of more TVL goes on chain. As there are more users on chain, there are more investment vehicles that people on chain can leverage. So I think one, it's probably that they haven't yet integrated into their sort of more traditional Web2 product suite, or it's kind of abstracted away under the hood, which is what something like Ripple does, right? It's not like these banks are actually necessarily have knowledge that it's crypto rails that cross-border transactions or cross-border payments are moving over. It's more that it just happens really fast like that, and they're able to reap the benefits of that process. So I think it's probably one of those two things, that maybe you don't log into your bank account today and you see like a stablecoin balance, or you see like crypto functionality. Yeah, curious to get Katya's thoughts as well, though.
Yeah, I think Nikhil brings up some really great points. I think a lot of institutions now, like at least fintechs, I think are really the ones that are experimenting with like launching their own stablecoins for internal services without the intent of actually displaying those stablecoin currencies to their end users. It's strictly just, it's faster, cheaper, more efficient for them to manage their balances on chain, and help facilitate like payments to different providers using these crypto rails. And so they don't even interact with these systems. Like end users don't even know that crypto is under the hood. But we're starting to see that be a far more popular use case. And they don't even need to brand them. Like those stable assets are strictly just being issued because they can trust them. These issuers can mint and burn them at will. They don't need a Circle account like as this like intermediary. They can control this within their own private systems. And it's really exciting to see like the types of innovations that are starting to happen. Sphere is like an incredible example of like using cryptocurrencies and building that like stablecoin ecosystem and stablecoin rails. And then I'm certain we'll see many more spin up within the next few years.
Makes sense. I feel like it's almost the fact that stable coins have seen so much adoption in general that they feel comfortable innovating and experimenting with stuff, right? So like every institution is coming up with use cases at this point that fits their product, fits their like fee structure. So if they can like optimize for international payments, they're okay kind of going into crypto and tapping into that potential. So it kind of makes sense why all of the institutions are okay with like launching stable coins, because for them, there's much more regulatory clarity around stablecoins, and there's just like so much more acceptance.
Definitely. Yeah, and even on like the more like central bank side, like Central Bank of Brazil has been working on issuing their own stable asset for a very long time. And that's really exciting to see like major like countries seriously think about crypto and what that means. They've worked with like number of different teams within the ecosystem just to better understand the space and figure out like how they can replicate this like on-chain economy for themselves to help better the lives of their citizens. So it's very exciting to see like there's the decentralized stable component, but there's also a lot of centralized stable coins that still have merit and still I think will power the digital economy.
Awesome. So like just to wrap this up now, I have two questions, right? So from a product perspective, are interop protocols at the end state in a way that we can provide everything that an institution needs to tokenize? And then from a BD perspective, like what do we need to do better to get more institutions on chain and also like tokenize through interop protocols?
Yeah, so I can kick off here. So I think that there's always room to make things better. There's always room to improve. There's always room to iterate. As more institutions come on board and as we learn more about their needs, we're going to continue to improve our product suite to address those needs. That said, I think that the out-of-the-box products that exist today solve a lot of the problems that institutions face and are sufficient for institute to get the ball rolling with a lot of institutions, either for them to just make a deployment and actually get on chain. For some institutions, it's sufficient enough for that. For others, it's sufficient enough to say, okay, this works out of the box for me. Maybe I want this kind of custom verification process built on top of this, or maybe I need this additional infrastructure on our end to like actually integrate this into the rest of our product suite, and maybe we need help doing that. And so I think there's always room to improve. We're always going to continue iterating and completing the product suite. Everyone talks about end game in crypto. There's a lot of crypto Twitter people saying end game this, end game that, like end game of bridging. I think we're never at the end game. The industry is always changing, needs are always changing, and there's a lot to iterate on. But the out of the box products are feature rich enough and robust enough and flexible enough to give institutions what they need today.
Yeah, honestly, like the way that NTT has been built is not in this like isolated box that the engineers within the Wormhole ecosystem have like put together without context from builders, right? All of these products that we've launched over the last few years have all been in collaboration with builders who need these interoperability solutions. So now as institutions are getting more involved, we're getting more feedback, and that's building more robustness into our tooling. And I think part of what our responsibilities on the growth side is to help continue to educate, like understand that these life cycles, that these sales cycles are very long, being patient and like working collaboratively in a way where, we're not just trying to force our, theses on how the space is going to evolve, but like come to some sort of like realistic conclusion on, how these teams can launch, how they can engage with the space, and how we can collaboratively build like the digital economy. So all we can do at this point is continue to support, address questions, be vocal when it comes to like as regulation is starting to be formed, and help these teams understand, because we don't want to come off as being aggressive and abrasive. We want to embrace the institutions coming on chain.
Awesome. So I feel like in general, through this episode, people can at least get more knowledge about token frameworks and entity, of course, and also the fact that institutions have different needs and interop protocols are kind of working to onboard them, right? Which is pretty exciting, because 3 years ago when I started working in this particular niche, could not imagine the fact that an institution would tokenize through one of like our own category products, right? But today it's a reality and it is happening. So I hope that next year we can just accelerate that adoption and maybe 10x those numbers that we have today.
10x is ambitious, but I definitely think it's feasible. Maybe even 50x. Maybe we're not thinking big enough.
What I was about to say, we got to be thinking about 100 and 1000x in this thing. It's not just meme coins. It's not just meme coins that have 1,000x.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe we leave those multiples to meme coins, but who knows? But awesome. Thanks a lot, guys, for doing this. And I hope we can do this again. And also, like, congrats on the Sky deal. And yeah, all the best.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Arjun.
much.